Good day viewers, my name is Ricc Storti and I am the creator of this channel. This video is about myself, and I have called it Rix Ramble. The first point I'd like to bring to your attention is that I do not request likes or subscribes from viewers. This channel is not a commercial exercise, it is my legacy. I was born in Melbourne, Australia. Specifically, I was born in Carlton, which was at the time an Italian suburb of Melbourne. My father migrated from a small town in the north of Italy called Ricc Storti in 1955. He was 15 years old at the time he migrated to Australia unaccompanied. My mother migrated to Australia with her mother in about 1951, when she was 5 years old. Her father had already migrated to Australia the previous year. The purpose of this video is to tell you a bit about myself, and why I created this channel, with the specific content it hosts. Well, to begin with, I'm an engineer. There's nothing particularly impressive about this, the world is full of them. However, what sets me apart from other engineers, I believe, is that I have devoted virtually my entire adult life, pursuing the answer to the question, what is gravity? I began my journey in 1996, and I have spent nearly 30 years deriving the equations and solutions contained on this channel. I provide all of my content, including research articles, free of charge and do not make any money from this endeavor. In fact, over the decades, it has cost me a great deal of money. Everything I have done has been completely self-funded. I've spent a significant proportion of my adult life trying to contribute to humanity and leave a legacy for future generations. The socially typical focus for me should have been to accumulate wealth. However, I believed, and still do, that it took billions of years for the universe to create each one of us, and we are personally obligated to understand it as much as possible before we die. On the 6th of November 2020, my father passed away. On the 16th of December 2020, about 6 weeks after my father passed away, I was diagnosed with very advanced blood cancer. As it turns out, I had been living with it for about 4 years, before I did anything about it. I spent virtually all of 2021 in hospital, receiving treatment. This included months of chemotherapy and 2 bone marrow transplants. I required emergency radiotherapy due to the risk of paralysis. Fortunately, the lesions threatening to crush my nervous system were eradicated, and the loss of using my legs was spared. The treatment process was horrific to say the least. I don't recommend it. I continue to suffer side effects from the standard treatment. I'm now living with peripheral neuropathy, which means that the nerves in my calves and feet are being continuously stimulated. At one point, at the beginning, it was so bad that my feet felt like they were on fire 24/7. Imagine holding your bare feet in snow for 2 to 3 minutes, then placing them into a hot bath. This is what it felt like, 24/7. Nowadays, it has subsided to a feeling of walking on golf balls. I cannot wear shoes for more than about 1 hour. To make things worse, all of this happened in the middle of a global pandemic, when I was severely immunocompromised. In fact, during each bone marrow transplant, your immune system is chemically deleted, so you basically don't have one at all. On my second bone marrow transplant, my body's own bacteria attacked me so fiercely, I almost died. It was the scariest moment of my life. For all of 2022, I was on maintenance chemotherapy, and my cancer was undetectable, although it was sitting quietly in the background. To date, my treatment has cost well over $1 million. Thankfully, by living in Australia, it has cost me nothing. Pretty much, everything is free. I do pay approximately $5 for a pack of maintenance chemotherapy per month, but I consider this to be so little, it's basically free. The cost of one packet of my monthly maintenance chemotherapy is actually about $30,000, so I have been told.
Do you want to write the time of thawing, or
maybe just when it starts, when it's thawed. It doesn't, yeah.
So how long will it take to thaw out, you reckon?
Not too long.
Yeah.
Like a minute or a minute or so.
Cool.
So 37.7 on there.
Alright viewers, this is all happening.
Yep. So I'm
Gonna get my,
So these are them frozen.
yeah,
And be
fantastic.
very careful with them.
This is the antidote to the poison, viewers,
Yeah.
that they gave me yesterday. A lethal dose of poison, which I agreed to. Unbelievable.
This one. Crackles a little bit. Never push it right to the bottom because that's obviously where the hot plate is. I don't want to like shock them. I just want to like slowly warm up, like you would when you're actually, frozen out in the snow or whatever.
Oh, in. That's a windscreen.
Yes, yeah. You don't put hot water on it. It's not gonna. So it goes from being like solid, now it's a bit squishy, and I'll see. Hopefully it will turn
It's
to.
very thin, isn't it?
Well, I hope so, because it's got to get.
What does it say?
I think it's 52 mils.
Okay.
What did I say on that one? 50. Oh. So it matched the one that.
So once they're melted, what, you just hang it up on the
Yeah,
thing
and let
there
it drip through.
and just connect it.
Yeah. Do you want to double check my lines as well on your one? Just so I've had another. I'm pretty sure that they're definitely filterless, but.
Yeah, let's make sure we've got this right.
Yeah.
I'm on the receiving end,
Yeah.
so it's
Yep, there's no filter.
I've got a vested interest in this.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, so do I.
I guess our license are on the line too, Rick.
Sorry?
Our license is on the line.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. Sorry, mate. Yeah, it is. You know, I'm waiting for someone to jump out with a cookbook.
Yeah, it's still a little bit cold, but that's okay.
That's it. That's what they harvested from me before. Wow. Put your trust in science, eh? Wow, look at that.
1522, we're going up.
Yeah.
It's my stuff. Any reason why it's shaped like a Christmas sock?
I don't think there is a reason.
See, look at that, viewers. It's like a Christmas sock. That's it. Okay. That's it, so it's going to drip through now. Oh, I can see it going.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's just going to go in there full bore, basically. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As fast as we can.
Yeah. It'll go in quicker if you lift it higher, if you can.
This one's been a bit.
Okay, yeah.
And funny.
Well, it fell before, so I was like, oh, but I think it's okay.
Pretty
Looks
fast.
good.
All right, good
Yeah.
stuff. All right, let's look for the moment of infusion. Oh, Jesus, who the hell's calling now? That's it, viewers, look at that. I'm being infused with my own stem cells. Amazing.
So
Amazing.
I'll have a shoot it.
And I'm going to get 2 of those bags, yeah?
Yeah, 2.
So I'm getting 2 of those viewers. That's what they, and that's pure stem cell, isn't it?
It is. It's got some preservative in it as
Yeah, yeah,
well, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
why we give you those medications.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
some
yeah.
people react, but
Yeah,
pretty much it's
Yeah,
just.
but that- I mean,
they've
it's-
just pulled.
yeah.
They did that.
Yeah, that's
pressure.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
apheresis.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not blood. That's basically
Yeah. Yeah.
that's stem cells.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Thanks for that. I think. Feel that, viewers. All that. Getting my own cocktail there. Beautiful. All right. I'll say ciao meow for now.
I do not have any form of medical insurance, so if I had have lived in the United States, I would have died in 2021. I've brought this point up because there must be many people in the US, in my situation, whereby the state simply allows them to perish. It seems absurd to me that the US has plenty of money to fund war internationally, but cannot afford to save the lives of its own people. When one develops a terminal illness, one's perspective on life changes. One begins to understand, a bit more deeply, what is truly important in life. I say to all viewers watching this, that health is wealth. I cannot see the benefit of being a wealthy man with blood cancer. I would rather be a poor man without it. In May of 2023, my blood work came back from the hospital, indicating that my blood cancer was reasserting itself. My cancer indicators are no longer undetectable, they're now detectable. At this stage, I do not know what my next line of treatment will be, but living in Australia means that it will be a platinum class line of treatment, unlike many other countries around the world. I cannot praise the Australian government and Australian medical workers highly enough. I have been treated like a king throughout my entire journey. In these photographs, I appear completely normal, and more or less, the same across each picture. However, nothing could be farther from the truth. In the top right-hand picture, my blood was measured to be composed of 50% white cells. The normal composition is between 10 to 20%. In fact, I was actually anemic, and my blood was carrying far fewer red cells than I actually needed. There literally wasn't enough space in my blood for more red cells. Consequently, I experienced extreme muscular fatigue because my tissues were being starved of oxygen. It became so acute that even the most trivial physical activity was extremely tiring. You wouldn't know it by looking at my picture in the top right-hand corner, but my spine was riddled with cancer lesions, and threatening to paralyze me. And remember, when this photograph was taken, I had no idea that I had blood cancer. I simply thought that the severe back pain and fatigue I was experiencing was just old age. I thought the universe was seeking retribution for the many years of super fitness I had enjoyed. In the bottom photograph, I had only been receiving chemotherapy for about 6 weeks. It wasn't easy or pleasant, and most of my cancerous lesions had not yet been dissolved, but little did I know how much worse the blood cancer journey would become. At that stage, I had no idea how destructive each bone marrow transplant would be on my body. I had no idea how much it was going to change my body and alter my life, seemingly permanently. This picture of me was taken shortly after my first bone marrow transplant. From the photograph, you get a reasonable understanding of the trauma the human body experiences after a single bone marrow transplant. A subsequent second bone marrow transplant is even more traumatic. By the time this picture was taken, I had lost all of the hair on my body, with the exception of my eyebrows, 4 times. A bone marrow transplant chemically deletes your immune system. This is a significant event because it also deletes your life history of all the diseases your body has fought. A bone marrow transplant is analogous to wiping the hard drive on your computer, then reinstalling the operating system. The problem with this is that all of the applications you had on your system have also been wiped away. This means that you need to reinstall all of your immunity information. In this picture of me, you see my body reacting to all of the allergens it is re-experiencing for the first time after my immunity database had been erased, resulting in a swollen face. You can also see the large quantity of medication I was consuming on a daily basis, for many months. In the bottom right-hand corner of the frame, you can see the garden hose which was inserted into my arm, leading to the entrance of my heart. This enabled the nurses to administer many forms of medication, without needing to penetrate my skin with needles. This is called the PICC line, and as bizarre as it may seem, it was fantastic to have. A nurse could simply come into my hospital room, plug into the garden hose, and pump medication directly into my bloodstream, without having to prick me with needles. By this stage, As you can imagine, I had received so many needles in the course of my treatment, I was completely fed up with needles. In 2007, I published a book titled Quinta Essentia Part 4. In this book, is the equation which calculates the power spectrum Hubble constant. It's the power spectrum Hubble constant, and not the cosmic distance ladder Hubble constant, because it also generates the cosmic microwave background radiation temperature. In 2008, my result was published by the Australian Institute of Physics as 67.1 km per second per megaparsec. In 2008, the power spectrum Hubble constant was unknown and nobody had ever heard of it. Only the distance ladder Hubble constant existed, and was published in 2008 by the Particle Data Group as being 73 km per second per megaparsec. In 2013, when the Planck satellite results were published, the power spectrum Hubble constant was discovered and published by the Particle Data Group as being 67.3 km per second per megaparsec. This means that the Particle Data Group abandoned the cosmic distance ladder Hubble constant, in favor of the power spectrum Hubble constant in 2013. So, the two things I achieved in 2008 which I consider to be my greatest achievements are, predicting the existence and value of the power spectrum Hubble constant, 5 years in advance of experimental confirmation. When I was 3 years old, I was watching an episode of the Thunderbirds with my mother. I was sitting on the couch in the lounge room, no living rooms in those days, and my mother was spoon-feeding me some soup for dinner. I refused to eat the soup unless I was able to watch the Thunderbirds. During this particular episode, the technology appearing on the show totally mesmerized me, and I decided then and there that whatever life I was going to have, it would be somehow connected to science. My fascination with gravity comes from the steady and everlasting diet of sci-fi movies and TV shows I have been watching since I was a child. I love the atomic propulsion system depicted in the 1960s era TV classic, Lost in Space. It seemed to me that the Jupiter 2 would need some form of gravity manipulation in order to fly, despite it never being stated on the show. Moreover, Star Trek, the original series, was also instrumental in forming my passion for gravity. The various probes and craft which would float on the show had no obvious form of reaction engine, so it could only have been gravity control. These childhood TV shows kept fueling the passion to understand the nature of gravity. Many years then passed, and I decided to study engineering at university because my mates were going to do it. I wanted to be with them, and although my love was science, I could see that in Australia, unlike the US, we don't invest much in most areas of science. So this ultimately led me to choose to stay with my mates and study engineering. Although, I did look into studying for a nuclear physics degree, but in the year I needed to apply, the course closed, hence, the choice was made for me. The next decision I faced, after being accepted to study engineering, was to choose my specialization. The first year was a general engineering year, in which we studied civil engineering, chemical engineering, electrical and electronic engineering, and mechanical engineering. At that stage, my mates had taken all different directions, some into civil engineering, some into chemical engineering, and some transferred into mining engineering. I was at a loss regarding my future, but then I watched Aliens with Sigourney Weaver. The mechanical exoskeleton she wore for the movie fascinated me, and I decided instantly to study mechanical engineering. However, I never lost the passion for the study of gravity. What I didn't know at the time was that the mechanical engineering degree I was studying gave me skills which were perfect for my fascination. I found that one may be as creative with science as any sculptor or fine artist. My father was a professional musician his entire life, so I'll make the claim that artistic self-expression is in my DNA. I also found that, for me, expressing my thoughts utilizing scientific argument has been extremely satisfying on a personal level. To be quite frank, I don't know how people can wake up in the morning, not wanting to understand how the universe works. You can place 100 physicists in any conference room, and all of them will believe that the guy standing next to them has a 99% correct understanding of physics, but they're just a little bit wrong, say 1%. Themselves, of course, possess a 100% accurate understanding of physics. Well, this 1% difference is the origin of artistic self-expression, from a scientist's perspective. I think that one of the key changes that needs to occur in science, is the marriage to the old way of working. By this I mean, it seems that if a specific physicist used a specific mathematical tool or approach to solve an historical problem, then all physicists going forward keep reaching for the same tool or approach. Mathematics itself is simply a suite of tools, there is no direct physical truth in mathematics. Let's look at the number 1. There are no variants of unity, there's only one symbol for it, yet the number 1 can represent an apple, an orange or a pear. So, again I say, mathematics is simply a suite of tools and general relativity is nothing more than a collection of mathematical tools as well. There are no physical grid lines in space. The true value of general relativity is the mathematics, not the theory. If you subtract the mathematical tools associated with general relativity, you are not left with much. At least, not much that's very useful. To understand my point, try making general relativity predictions without the math, it goes almost nowhere. People forget that it took Einstein a decade to formulate general relativity, and he had the help of some very clever professional mathematicians. A disproportionate amount of credit is given to Einstein, and not nearly enough to those around him, whom helped him. I suppose this arises because it's easier for the general public to identify with individuals, rather than teams of people. The best example of physicists not embracing new ways of working, is Buckingham Pi theory. Much of our contemporary understanding of thermodynamics and fluid mechanics is linked to Buckingham Pi theory, yet it has been my personal observational experience, that it is virtually unknown in the physics community. I find this truly bizarre and indicative of a poor education system. Thermodynamics in particular, is a cornerstone of physics, so the fact that it doesn't seem to be covered in physics courses, is quite a surprise in my view. Therefore, if a reviewer is unfamiliar with certain fields of study, it can lead to bias and rejection when submitting research articles. Moreover, it seems to me that, as a generalization, reviewers do not want to invest substantial chunks of their time into reviewing research articles. Often, in my opinion, if a reviewer is unfamiliar with an equation, the easiest path is simply to reject the research article. Let's be candid about this, reviewers are not paid, their contribution is voluntary. This means that they don't want to be stuck learning or investigating something new, which may require significant personal effort. What reviewers want is a rapid turnaround. To achieve this, reviewers require familiarity of techniques and methods. Like all people, reviewers want to execute the least amount of work possible, for the maximum personal gain. Remember, they aren't paid to execute the reviewing function, it is purely voluntary. So, the bottom line here is that the physics community is not open to new ideas, unless they have come from a person of note, that is, a person of established scientific reputation. This last point is particularly important, so please make a mental note of it. Feedback is a particularly frustrating topic to address. I say this because physicists appear to be tribal. By that I mean, if you're not a physicist, you don't have an understanding of physics. This seems bizarre because engineering is merely specializations of physics. Engineering is actually nothing but physics and mathematics. I haven't really presented my work to too many engineers, simply because it's not within their sphere of interest. I should point out that I have never received any criticism from a person willing to reveal their identity to me. Of course I have received criticism from unidentified reviewers. This occurs because they do not need to defend their views. Editors tend to support reviewers without question, irrespective of assessment. This is a fundamental flaw in the scientific review process. Reviewers are permitted to make almost any outrageous claim they wish, without the requirement of being cross-examined. This means that reviewers, almost always, have the last word. Therefore, getting new ideas into circulation is extremely difficult. Being dismissive is more psychological than anything else. Once you've invested 7 to 10 years in becoming a professional physicist, you're comfortable with what you know. You don't want to start learning again. Your potential employers are probably not expecting you to act outside your training, so one's default position becomes associated with what I know, not how to solve problems. In my opinion, Physicists as a generalization are taught what to think, not how to think. However, an engineer is taught how to think, because two engineering problems are almost never the same. Physics is universal, engineering is local. Hence, physicists are taught what to think, not how to think. When you finish engineering and enter the workforce, you find out that almost everything you've learned is virtually useless. An engineer literally starts again, with each new job. In the year I started full-time study at university, on the 27th of March 1987, at about 10 a.m., I was involved in a terrible car accident. I suffered a broken pelvis, broken ribs, I bled internally for 3 days, and I needed 25 staples across the top of my skull. I was a complete mess. It was amazing that I survived. The engine block of the car I was driving was split in two. I was about 4 kilometers from home at the time. A young 33-year-old man, from an outer suburb of Melbourne named Mornington, hit the driver's side door, at an estimated 100 kilometers per hour. He was driving a Nissan Skyline. He had failed to stop at red lights, because he was looking at a street directory, attempting to navigate. He claimed that he was running late for a meeting. When he looked up from reading the street directory, it was too late, there was no time to apply the brakes. He hit me with full force. Incidentally, the reason I was in the intersection at that hour is because I had left university early, soon after arriving, to spend some time with my girlfriend before attending a party that evening. I was not yet 19 years old, so at that age, time with one's girlfriend when her parents are at work, was extremely valuable and not to be wasted. Anyway, this event meant that I transferred from full-time study to part-time study. My only other choice was to defer the year completely, but my parents wouldn't let me do it, for fear that I would never return to university. Part-time study was pretty much the only workable option for me in my situation. I didn't know it at the time, but it was the best delay of my life. In first year, I learned an area of mathematics called Fourier series. I was fascinated by how it was possible to model any form of wave, utilizing Fourier series. It also instantly dawned upon me that it can also be utilized to model any value of constant gravitational acceleration. I was mesmerized by this, and I invested a great deal of time into thoroughly understanding it. When I transitioned to my second-year subjects, a new professor had joined the university, and little did I know that this man would change my life. Because I transitioned from full-time to part-time study, I got this new professor. If I had have remained a full-time student, I would have missed him because part-time classes were at night in those days. Anyway, I recall the professor coming into our fluid mechanics class one day, early in the semester. He started talking about Buckingham pi theory. The other students in the class appeared to take it as just another lecture, but for me, I had an epiphany. Instantly upon seeing the technique, I felt that for a brief moment, I understood the entire universe. I felt that all the secrets of nature were now an open book to me. I felt that I could model any and all forms of physical problems. I learned how to derive a physical equation from literally nothing, just thin air. For most students, equations seem to just appear from nowhere. From the perspective of most students, some clever person long ago came up with them, but nobody really understand how they might actually be formulated. But now I had the power to formulate them for myself. This was a very liberating experience. It also became very obvious to me that Buckingham pi theory could be blended with Fourier mathematics, where appropriate, very easily. I instantly realized that the number 1, quantized harmonically over the Fourier domain, can be applied to any situation without breaking it. As we all know, multiplying anything by the number 1 doesn't change the result. This occurred in 1988. These techniques lay dormant within me until 1996. This is the year I met some important colleagues online. I was introduced to general relativity and the polarizable vacuum model of gravity. When I became familiar enough with general relativity, some years later, I immediately recognized that my unit harmonic operator, that is the number 1 decomposed over the Fourier domain, could be plugged into the compact tensor form of Einstein's solution. It was also very obvious to me that my unit harmonic operator can be utilized to integrate general relativity with quantum mechanics. Each tensor element could simply be multiplied by its quantized version of the number 1, decomposed over the Fourier domain. The reason I never pushed my quantum-integrated general relativity solution until recently, is because the polarizable vacuum model is a direct competitor to general relativity. It has now become exceedingly obvious to me that the physics community simply does not want an alternative to general relativity, even if it is already linked to quantum mechanics. What the physics community wants is a link between general relativity and quantum mechanics, in standard tensor notation. The fact that the tensor notation of general relativity is simply a specific mathematical representation of it, is totally overlooked. Unfortunately, the tensor notation of general relativity, with invisible grid lines in all directions, is nowadays being sold as physical fact. An analogy might be the number 1 only ever representing an apple, not an orange or a pear. Everything is a mathematical method. This is why our understanding of the universe changes with time, over decades and centuries. For example, Newton's gravitational force evaporated from existence when general relativity came into fashion. If the equations describing gravitational force were actually physical, then the concept of gravitational force, which has served us for centuries, could not have evaporated when general relativity surfaced. Moreover, the fact that general relativity did not predict dark energy, dark matter or accelerated cosmological expansion, can only mean that general relativity is also non-physical, just like everything else. Only the predictions are physical, because we can measure them. The tool itself is just a tool, a way of reasoning. There is no physical truth in the tools of general relativity. I tolerate people interpreting my mathematics literally, in order to allow them to comprehend electrogravimagnetics. This is what most people are comfortable with. Most people simply cannot grasp that mathematics is just a tool. It has no physical elements. There's nothing physical about the spoken word, it's just a communication tool. If I yell the word, boat, aloud, a boat does not materialize into existence. I discovered that a harmonic relationship exists by firstly deriving the experimentally verified values of proton root mean squared charge radius, and neutron mean squared charge radius. Both of my derivations had identical mathematical forms. This is unique. The neutron mean squared charge radius is typically expressed as a negative squared quantity, and the so-called complex quark structure within the neutron is stated as being the reason for it, that is, according to the standard model of particle physics. I've shown that this is not actually necessary to know or define, in order to calculate an experimentally verified result. What this means is that particle physicists don't understand what's going on inside a neutron, so they're speculating, very poorly. Pretty much they're calling it magic, being an exercise for David Copperfield to solve. I show conclusively that the negative squared form of neutron size is a substantial failing of the standard model of particle physics. After finishing the proton and neutron size solutions, I commenced on the electron. I discovered very early on that electric charge evaporated when relating the gravitational acceleration induced by the electron to the quantum vacuum. You can review episode 1 to see how it was done. This meant that the classical electron radius was not the size of the electron that I was interested in. The classical electron radius contains an electric charge term. Hence, the classical electron radius is a measure of electron size that other charged particles perceive the electron as being. But I wanted to know the size that the quantum vacuum perceived the electron, not just another charged particle. Well, I ended up solving the problem. You can find it in my research literature as well as episode 7. When I compared the quantum vacuum cutoff frequencies of the proton and electron, an astonishing harmonic relationship revealed itself. Anyway, it became very apparent to me after solving this problem, that the solution can be extended to a harmonic representation of all fundamental particles. Experimental validation is required for this representation of fundamental particles, but it's a groundbreaking unification and has raised eyebrows. My harmonic particle solution led to my cosmology solutions, enabling my experimentally verified derivation of the power spectrum Hubble constant, distance ladder Hubble constant and cosmic microwave background radiation temperature. I was able to utilize the harmonic representation of fundamental particles, by using the Milky Way as a reference particle, then scaling the result to the Hubble length. In other words, I was able to use our Milky Way galaxy as the starting point for a scaling technique, rooted in Buckingham Pi theory. I have compiled thousands of pages of research, involving many thousands of man-hours. This became possible for two reasons: self-sacrifice and risk. I've run my own consultancy pretty much my whole life. This meant that I have been looking for new contracts ceaselessly. However, I very frequently gave myself extended periods of non-contract, in order to do research. The financial cost to me for doing this, has been bone-shattering. I've never met any person in my lifetime whom would have been prepared to make these kinds of financial self-sacrifices. I would estimate personal time invested this way to be about 20,000 man-hours. With respect to taking risk, I would aim at about half my day working on my research, when I was deployed to a client. This was extremely risky, but I seemed to get away with it. I would estimate this to be approximately 20,000 man-hours once again. Was this ethical? Probably not, but it has been my observational experience that most people in an office job in Australia only actually work about 3 hours per day, at most. The majority of people's time is consumed pretending that they're working. Many people simply do not have the courage to confess this truth. Now let's look at the time I invested after hours. Typically, this would be no less than 2 hours per day. So, when I was deployed to a client, I would come home and work another couple of hours per day, on average. I estimate this to be approximately 10,000 man-hours. Therefore, in grand total, I devoted approximately 50,000 man-hours over 30 years. However, in addition to this, there's also the money I've spent on publication charges. I would estimate this to be approximately $20,000 Australian. In addition, I estimate my travel expenditure for conferences to be also approximately $20,000 Australian. When we add all this together with a private contractor charge-out rate of $1,000 per day, Australian, we arrive at a value of approximately $6.25 million Australian. Ask yourself, would you personally burn $6.25 million and devote your lifetime to help humanity? Would you invest $6.25 million for zero return, no return at all, not a cent? I can't imagine that too many people would do this. Well viewers, I think I've rambled enough for now. I don't know if this will be my first or my last ramble. Please keep in mind that this channel is my legacy, it's an historical record. My days are numbered and the clock is ticking. I have never had any motivation to commercialize or monetize anything I have ever done. Every page of research I have produced, and every video I have created, has been done to give back to the universe which created me. In the words of Carl Sagan, we are a way for the universe to know itself.